Alex Lasry, thank you for joining us on Up North News.
Thanks for having me.
Let's start first by why anybody would want to run for Congress, whether the House or the Senate, given everything that we see out there and the impression that it leaves on folks. Why did you make the decision to run for Senate?
Well, look, I think what we have learned and what I've seen, in my my 2 years working in the White House, and then also my years working with and running the Bucks. What we've seen is that government can make a difference, and government can play an important role, and that our Congress can make a difference. But unfortunately, what we've had the last 10 years is someone who hasn't really been that interested in representing the people of Wisconsin. And what I want to be able to do is bring a fresh perspective, new ideas, but also someone who can get things done. When you're talking about some of, I think, the big issues like a $15 minimum wage or creating union jobs, we've actually been able to do that. When we're talking about something as big as the Democratic National Convention that no one thought could come here, I was able to help lead the bid and help win that convention. And so there are a lot of issues that are plaguing the state, whether it's in northern, western Wisconsin or in southeastern Wisconsin. We've got issues such as how are we creating a broadband infrastructure? How are we going to ensure that our family farms and small businesses are able to continue to thrive, and how are we going to create jobs and bring more investment into this state? And these are all the things that I think I can create, bring a fresh perspective on, but also create some real results.
You mentioned that rural Wisconsin broadband and the struggles for farm families and such. What was it that made you decide that your first few virtual events were going to be in places like Barron and Rusk counties?
Well, I think one of the most important things that we need to do, especially as we're trying to, reach out, is go to places where, not only Democrats but Republicans have been neglecting. And I think there are a lot of voters who are feeling like their voices aren't being heard and their concerns aren't being represented in Washington. And so, what we wanted to make sure that we did was the first places that we went out to was Rusk County, Barron County, and Dodge County, and make sure that we were talking to voters from across this state who, I think what we've been able to see are frustrated with, what's been going on, especially over these last 10 years. And hopefully we've been able to tell them, not only are we going to be able to get things done for them, but that we're also listening to their concerns, and and that I'll be a senator who will be representing them in Washington.
Let's talk about senators and representing Wisconsinites, especially since Wisconsin has experience with senators who have personal wealth. We had Herb Kohl with the tagline, "Nobody's senator but yours." We've had Ron Johnson, who appears to have made decisions that more likely benefit people closer to his tax bracket. What is it that people need to know about you in terms of whether your family wealth makes you accountable and connected to middle class Wisconsin families as you make decisions in Washington?
Look, I would just look at our record. Look at the issues that I'm talking about, and look at what we've actually been able to accomplish. When it's become issues, that are important on how are we going to bring investment and jobs back to the state, and how are we going to raise wages. We've done that. When it comes to a $15 minimum wage, we've been at the forefront leading and making sure that we're paying our workers a $15 minimum wage. When it's been to creating union jobs, we've been at the forefront and created 10,000 union jobs when we created Fiserv Forum. And when it's been about creating investment in the state, we made sure that when we built Fiserv Forum, 80% of the materials were sourced right here from Wisconsin. And so that's partnering with companies and creating contracts and jobs. And then when it came to the convention, again, that was something where we were going to be bringing hundreds of $millions of economic impact to this state, and a lot of people who are going to be coming here for the first time that would then become repeat customers and drive our tourism up and our investment. And so, I think when talking about what are my values, well, we've been able to show that you can run a business with progressive values, have it be successful, and that's what we're asking, of all the voters to look at my record, look at what we've been able to accomplish, and see that we're going to continue to fight and do those same things as the next senator from Wisconsin.
There is There's a pretty fair chance that there may be a large field for this race simply because the Democratic field for governor a couple of years back had so many people that were anticipating running for the job. Many of them will have public service, elected office experience. What is it that makes you think that you're a good choice without some direct political experience previously?
Well, I've got political experience. I've worked in the White House, and I've seen, how Washington works up close. But I think what we can also show is, and one of the ways that I think we're really going to differentiate ourselves is that we're not just talking about big issues, where we're creating results on them. Again, when we're talking about raising wages, creating jobs, or bringing, big events and conventions and investment back to the state, we've done that. When we're talking about, you know, uh, showing that you don't have to choose between the environment and green jobs and creating jobs. With Pfizer Forum in the Deer District, we've shown that we've created one of the most environmentally friendly arenas in North America. And so, I think these are all the things, and how we're going to differentiate ourselves is not just by saying these are the issues that we're fighting for, but showing how we've already led on those issues, and then being able to show that we're going to be going around the state, and really talking and listening to voters, and being everywhere. And I think that this is a time where the stakes are high, and what we need is not kind of that traditional political thinking, but I think a fresh perspective, and someone who's actually gotten results. And that's why we're running, and I think that's what I can bring and differentiate in this race.
Are there issues that we haven't discussed that are personal, priority issues to you, things that you think are not getting enough attention, or causes that you'd like to be a champion for?
Well, I think some of the main things that that we're talking about, and I think that this race is going to be about is going to be about jobs. It's going to be how we're getting from the COVID pandemic into the COVID recovery, and ensuring that it's a recovery that's working for everyone. What we've noted is, kind of the last two big, seismic shifts in our economy, in those recoveries, they didn't work for everyone, and that's continued, I think, into this one. And what was so great about, I think, the COVID relief bill that President Biden is hopefully going to sign later this week. It does allow and make sure that the recovery is going to at least help those who need it most, and hopefully I can go to the Senate, and continue to help build on that, because I think that as we look, into what the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years are going to look like, what's going to be about is how are we bringing jobs back. And so we've talked about corporations earning their tax cut by bringing their manufacturing and supply chains back into the United States, and in particular Wisconsin, raising wages for workers, and how we're going to do things like a broadband infrastructure. Not having broadband across the state is like not having roads. It is something that you desperately need, and is you can't bring investment into your part of the into your town or city, unless you have strong broadband infrastructure. How are we ensuring that our farms and small businesses aren't being overtaken, by big corporations and big agribusiness? I think these are the things that, while not always the sexiest issues, I think are some of the most important.
One strategic question that certainly bears asking when it comes to Ron Johnson himself. He has certainly made his share of headlines lately with a lot of unsubstantiated claims about the election. Prior to that, conspiracy theories. Is that an important point of any Democrat who's running for that seat? Or at some point, do you run the risk of neglecting issues that families care about most? So calling attention to, where Johnson you feel may not be representing Wisconsin, but also not giving that too much attention. Where do you come down on that?
Look, I think it's an important data point in how Ron Johnson hasn't been representing the people of Wisconsin, and continues to show that he's not an honest broker, and someone who is more interested in peddling lies and conspiracies rather than actually getting something done, in for the people of Wisconsin. And so, do I think it's going to be the most critical thing? No. Well, we're going to be talking about our raising wages and creating jobs, and how are we going to create, as I said, broadband infrastructure, access to healthcare. But what it does show is that if it was up to Ron Johnson, the most important things he'd want to be talking about is lies and conspiracies, and not being honest with the people of Wisconsin. And if it was up to him, there wouldn't be a $15 minimum wage. There wouldn't be a COVID relief bill. And so these are the things that we're going to be pointing out in terms of what that contrast looks like. But I think it's, as you said, the most important thing we can do is talk about why us. Why this campaign, and what I can do with the opportunity, as the next senator from Wisconsin, to make sure that we're giving Tammy Baldwin a real partner in DC, to bring some results for the people of Wisconsin that we desperately deserve.
What do you tell folks about the way that the pandemic was handled, either wrongly or correctly, in terms of its real impact, not just on the team, but on everything that was supported by it? Whether the pain was unnecessarily long, or if it was managed well at the local level. I just want your 1 year impression on what that pandemic really meant for people around the Deer District.
I mean, look, it was tough. I mean, when you just look at Fiserv Forum, and then also all of the restaurants that were around it. I mean, we were able to work with a lot of them to ensure that we were giving, some rent relief, to ensure that people were able to make it through. But do I think a lot of the issues that happened, that some of these things could have maybe been heated off? Yeah, I think if we had more of a federal response, from the Trump administration, Republican Congress at the time. Yeah, I think a lot of the issues and pain that people not only working, in the restaurant industry, over by the Deer District and around the state, but the business owners as well. I think there could have been a lot of much needed relief, that is coming now. But for some businesses was too late. And so, I think when you look at how we got through this pandemic, for a lot of people, there was a lot of unnecessary pain that the federal government could have stepped in, and helped out with. Giving checks, giving checks to workers, making sure that businesses had an easier access to zero interest loans, so that they could get through a period through no fault of their own. This wasn't bad business decisions. This was a pandemic that we did not see coming, but then exacerbated the problems because we weren't giving the relief to businesses and to workers that deserved it.
What I'm hearing is, whether it's Ron Johnson and Senate Republicans at the federal level, or legislative Republicans at the state level, that there could have been more of a role of a helpful, functional government if you and others had been in office there instead.
I mean, look, I think you just look at the facts, right? Like, did Senate, legislative Republicans didn't come to work, during the entire COVID pandemic, and were more worried about fighting whether we were having mask mandates or not, rather than how are we going to bring relief and help to workers and small businesses. And the same thing with the federal government, rather than creating making sure that we were prepared with strong vaccine distribution, and making sure that we had the proper amount of doses, and making sure that workers and businesses had the relief they needed. It was a constant, a constant feeding of lies and conspiracies about what was going on, and not taking this pandemic seriously. And so, if we had, President Biden and the Democratic Congress that we have now, I think you would have seen a lot of this pandemic handled a lot better, with a lot less pain, than we saw.
Senate candidate Alex Lasry, thank you again for your time and for joining us here on Up North News.
Thanks for having me.